Welcome back to the ChessGoals YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to look at the top 10 openings for white. This is based on club level games in the past 12 months. So April of 2021 through the end of April 2022. So this is relevant to you guys, most players, which openings are working best in the past year. We're going to start at number 10 and work our way up to number 1. And this is based on the 39 most popular openings according to the chess.com openings page. All right, number 10. White is winning 53.5%, scoring 53.5%. 52% is our baseline overall for white to win. Number 10 is the Polish opening. This is 1b4. Not very common, but there are some tricks with the Polish opening. There was a player at my local club that played the Polish quite a bit, and he was very good at it because what he would do is he would let you build a big center with moves like e5 and d5, but then he would attack on the queen side, bishop b2, on to c4, and he would play these tricky kind of flank lines where he knew how to play those positions and he was in his comfort zone. And oftentimes, myself or whoever he was playing was not in their comfort zone. Also, this pawn on b4, it's very tempting for black to play e5 and capture that pawn, but that extends the bishop and it kind of walks right into what white wants. So we can see here top players are Hikaru Nakamura and Bent Larson. And in terms of popularity at the GM level, this was at about 1.5% back in the 70s, and it's sitting around 1% currently. I don't expect this line to gain any popularity, but it is one that you want to make sure you have a defense ready for, this 1b4 Polish opening. Let's move on to number 9. Number 9, we have the ready opening. The ready is also scoring right around 53.5% for white. This is one knight f3. And in terms of which first move scores best, almost at all levels, knight to f3 is the top scoring move. That's grandmasters, masters, club level players. Knight to f3 is a tricky move, and it gives a lot of chances to outplay your opponent. I remember Vladimir Kramnik was a player that really played a lot of knight f3 for a while, and he was leading the charge. And now a ton of players play knight f3, especially in blitz and bullet. So if you're someone that likes to play d4 or c4 on the first move, I would definitely recommend adding one knight f3 to your repertoire because then you can start to play some move order tricks. You can play like anti-King's Indian defense systems, anti-kids, anti-Slavs. Depending on what your opponent wants to do, knight f3 could be a good move order that you can kind of have a couple options. This is my favorite first move for white. I've played quite a bit of knight f3 in my career. Moving on to number 8, the Slav defense. Again, we're sitting in the 53.5% territory for white. We kind of have a tie between these bottom 4 or 5 openings. Slav defense happens after d4, d5, c4, c6. The Slav I've played a lot from both sides, and I have to say, it feels like white has that slight pull. If you compare the Slav to the Caro-Kann, for example, in the Caro-Kann, the C pawn is back and the E pawn is up. Black has the same structure, but the pawns aren't symmetric if white takes, right? So in the Slav, white has this option to take. C takes d5, and if the C pawn takes back, now we have this complete symmetry, but it's white to move. In the Caro-Kann, we don't have the complete symmetry because the E pawn's up and the C pawn is going to take back, right? So it's different pawns capturing on D5, and I think that gives some more dynamic chances for black. And one thing we're going to note in these openings is the side that has the initiative tends to have a better score, right? So here, white's going to just have that slight pull, and that's why the Slav defense comes in at number 8. Moving on to number 7, a highly aggressive opening. And look at the popularity chart. This opening was very popular back in the early 1900s, and now almost no one at the very top level plays it because, according to the computers, this isn't the greatest opening. Computers dictate a lot of what top players play currently, but it's a romantic opening. It's a classic opening. And it's definitely one that you can play at the club level and get some good results. It's very aggressive. What you want to do is bring your knight out quick, bishop out, castle, and your rook will be sitting on f1, pointing up the f file, ready to attack the black king. So King's Gambit comes in at number 7, 53.5% for white. Number 6. Now we have a more classic opening that you will see at the high levels, the Roy Lopez opening. Really, I think this is the most popular opening after E4, E5. It's just it's classic, right? What we want to do is play for C3 and D4, and if the bishop gets kicked, we can bring it back to A4, tuck him on C2, and from there, the bishop points at H7. This is a classic way to play. Percentage wise, it's been hovering around 4 or 5% for decades. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I think the Roy Lopez is here to stay. It's one of the most effective systems at the highest levels. And there's a lot of options for black to go wrong. So if you know these systems well, you can really outplay your opponents. Moving on to number 5, we have the Vienna game. So instead of knight to F3, which led to the Roy Lopez, now we're looking at knight to C3. Oftentimes these can transpose. If white brings both knights out, say a four knights type system, what knight c3 doesn't allow white to do is play pawn to c3 and pawn to d4 to build their center that way. But what knight c3 does allow white to play, and this is why it scores so well, is pawn to f4. So you kind of get that King's Gambit-esque position, but you don't have to immediately play f4. Right? You could prepare it maybe with d3, bring the bishop out, play the d pawn up, then play f4. I know my friend Dennis played the Vienna for a long time in his chess career, and he was very successful with it. Sharp attacking player. Vienna is definitely something I would recommend playing at the club level if you want to try to get some attacking chess. The Vienna scores 54% for white. That was number 5. Moving on to number 4, we have the King's Indian attack, 54.5% for white. King's Indian is knight to f3, followed by g3. So typically, white sets up a big center in chess, right? E4, D4, maybe even C4. King's Indian attack is very interesting. White is playing this hypermodern style where you keep the pieces back. Keep the pawns back in the center, move the pieces out, and then you later bring the pawns into the center. This opening is going to keep increasing in popularity. I can almost guarantee it. It was kind of sitting at 3%, and in the last 10 or so years, it's up to 6%. It's going to keep going higher. The engines love it. It scores really well in practice, like we talked about with the ready opening, one knight f3. One of the reasons the ready does so well is it leads to the King's Indian attack. These positions are flexible, they score well in practice, and the engine likes them. It's only going to keep improving. And it's also kind of a system based opening, right? Where you can keep playing the same setup over and over and just get really good at it. I think if you want to pick up the King's Indian attack, you're going to have good results. Number 3, this is a classic one, the Queen's Gambit, d4, d5, c4. So this could lead to a Slav, which we saw white scores pretty well. But white also scores very well if black takes. D takes c4, e6. White scores well. They can either play for a Catalan with knight to f3, or they can play kind of a classical knight c3, knight f3. We recommend Queen's Gambit in our 1d4 course. This is something that I really like playing from the white side. There's a Netflix series on it too, which I think kind of increased the popularity, at least in terms of people searching for Queen's Gambit. What is the Queen's Gambit? So that's number 3. Closely linked to this one, number 2, and this is one of my favorites. I am working on a new course on the system currently, the Catalan opening, d4, c4, and g3. And this also happens if this pawn is on d5 and the knight is back, you can do a similar move order. Look at this Catalan popularity, 1.8%. It was down to about half a percent back in the 70s. I think Vladimir Kramnik is the player that revived this system. It doesn't show the players here. That's okay. Vladimir Kramnik started playing the Catalan, and right around 2010, it became very popular. I picked it up around 2012. There was a famous book by Quality Chess out by Boris Avruk on the Catalan. The idea is you want to fiend kettle this bishop, have a big center, and you long term play against the queen side. And it's very effective. It's a system based opening, so you kind of get these Catalan esque positions time after time. very easy, I think, to play for a win. Black tends to make a lot of mistakes at the club level. I've been playing the Catalan for the last 8 or so years. I really enjoy the Catalan. So that's number two, 55%. All right, number one. Can you take a guess what it is? Put your guess in the comments. What do you think number one is? We haven't shown it yet. I'll give you a hint. One of our opening courses does recommend this exact line. All right, I'm very curious to read the comments after this. Number one is the Scotch game. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, pawn to D4. Gary Kasparov has played this quite a bit. It's not as classical as playing the Roy Lopez, which would be bishop to B5, like we talked about. A pawn to D4 is immediately trying to grab some space in the center, and you can get some really wild attacking positions where you take that center space and you queenside castle afterwards. Let me just show an example. I'll pop into this board, shrink her down a bit. We can play knight takes D4, and after bishop C5, this is what we recommend in our E4 course, knight to B3, the Potter variation it's called. And after the bishop retreats, what we're going to do is play queen to E2 and castle queenside. And if you look at the resulting position, the black king is going to end up on the king side most likely. After F3, our plan is to play G4, G5, H4, H5, and we have this pawn storm against the black king. Black's counterplay should come from the pawn storm over here on the queen side. But look at the problem. Knight on c6, bishop on b6. That slows down the black pawns. There's also a pawn on d6. So if the c5 pawn pushes, b6 becomes a huge weakness. So I think these lines are really fun for white. White's got the jump start in the attack. White's got the extra space. And we've only traded one pawn each. That means there's a ton of attackers on the board. So that's number one, the Scotch game. 55.5% for white, 3.5% more than the overall average, which is pretty significant. And I find like if you can start out with that couple extra percentage points, it's just that much more likely that black's going to fall into a line where all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, white scores 70% in this position because black made a slip up in a 55.5% opening. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Top 10 openings for white. If you did, let me know in the comments. We'll probably be making one for black soon, assuming you guys like this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.